welcome everyone. In case, a couple of people might have missed, so I'm Rose McGeown. I'm one of the educational psychologists in WAAS, and today's workshop is around talking with your child about their autism diagnosis. So I've spoken already a bit about language, but again, just kind of highlighting the importance of keeping it positive and just being mindful about what the language is that you're using. Like I said, we try to avoid using terminology that references or refers to autism being a disorder or kind of quite more negative language. We try to use more neutral or positive and empowering language. And I do think that makes a big difference to the young people then that we're talking to. But at the same time, trying not to overcomplicate it. So like I said, on the whole, I just tend to refer to autism just as autism. I don't use, autism spectrum condition, because I feel that sometimes just having the one term is it's a completely neutral term and it's much easier for lots of people to remember. So just keeping it simple and trying not to overcomplicate what you're trying to explain, but also remembering that no one is the same. So I meet loads of young people all the time who've got autism. Some people will like it to be referred to as autistic. Some people want to say they've someone with autism. Some people I meet want to be called an Aspie, short for having Asperger's syndrome. So everyone is completely different. And as your child gets older, they'll probably make a decision about kind of like how they want to refer to their autism, or they might just not want other people to know and then they just kind of keep it to themselves. So it's completely an individual choice. Using visuals is really good. As we know, for lots of autistic children, they respond much better if we can use visuals. So again, in everything that we do, we would say use visuals as much as possible. So that task that I said about using looking at similarities and difference between family members, you could print off photos, write words around them, and they can make, I don't know, PowerPoint if they're a bit older and they like to make things really visual in that way. You can look at books together. There's lots of YouTubers out there who speak about their own experiences of being autistic, so there's lots and lots of resources, but trying to avoid, kind of to be honest, what I'm doing today, just speaking at somebody, because it's so much information to take in. And if we compare it with nice visuals, that's much easier for a young person to understand. And like I said previously, over time, we can just continue to develop their understanding. So don't feel that you have to share everything all at once. I would, really encourage you to start off with the similarities and differences, pointing out patterns, and then kind of building up from there, adding in more information as you wish. And just to reassure you, these are quotes from children, young people, and some adults. This is their advice that they would give to parents about telling their child about their autism diagnosis. And for example, Sam, who's age 8, so he's probably quite, I guess a more similar age to some of your children. He says to just tell them they're autistic because they might not understand why they're different otherwise. So just that importance of just telling someone, because it actually really helps them to understand about their identity and why there might be differences, and not to be, worried about those differences. There's a very reasonable explanation. There's people to support them if they do find things tricky. Amelia said to not make it sound like a big deal, to just let them know that they are good, there are good sides to it as well, and if they think positively, things will turn out positively. So she's kind of again reiterating that message of trying to keep things positive and very balanced, because we do know that there are challenges, of course, but there are also loads and loads of positive things. So we don't want to make our child feel nervous. And Brian, who's age 28, said just to lead with the fact that differences doesn't mean bad. It just means different, and we're all different, and autism is just another difference. And finally, Tara says just to tell them, in the car, it was just me and mummy. We talked about the good things and how I was different to my cousin. So hopefully all these quotes just help with those points, I guess, that I've just said about trying to stay positive or kind of give more like neutral information. And the biggest thing is just to put forward this idea of differences being really normal, and of course we're all different. And for actually what I would say is for the younger ones, you could even start with thinking about more concrete examples. So, I might have brown hair, they might have blonde hair, thinking of physical differences, and then going on to differences in terms of preferences, and then you can go to difference in terms of brain differences. But knowing that all of these are completely normal, and that's absolutely fine. And this is a quote from a young person who is saying that when they found out about their autism diagnosis, that they were immensely relieved to find out. And really, it gave them context to why they were the way they are. So again, it can be a really helpful thing to share, and why we would encourage people to say sooner rather than later, because it really helps a person to kind of understand their identity and why they experience the world in the way they do. But of course, there is always a worry in case a child does feel upset or anxious about their diagnosis. So there are some children who might worry, and what they might think is they've been to the hospital or they've been to see a doctor a few times, and their parent has found out some information with them, so they kind of therefore think maybe they're not very well, or they've the disease, or they're contagious. So we just need to reassure them that they're not ill, they are not contagious, there's nothing wrong with them, but they do have a difference, kind of going back to this idea of differences. And it isn't something that can be cured, but it is something that people can support with. So they're always going to be like this, but there are ways that people can help them find things a bit easier or develop their skills in certain areas. And it can be really helpful, I think, to say that at school that there's lots of people that are going to help them as well. So, sharing this information with schools, I would say, really important. So with your SENCO, your special educational needs coordinator at school, they will be able to put in additional support. And you might also want to make sure that the class teacher knows, or any other kind of key members of staff. And there's lots of support out there, and we in WAAS are always supporting schools to develop their knowledge of autism as well. And then yes, next. So I'd say about reading books together, watching videos, or talking to similar others is really helpful. So you don't always have to come up with this information. It's all out there already. And I'm going to, in the next couple of slides, share some of these resources that you can use. But again, I think it's really nice if it's a shared experience. So rather than your child being given a book and going off, maybe if they're older they might like that, but for the young ones, just to kind of do this together, so it's a really nice positive experience and you're both learning together, is really, really nice. And introducing positive autistic role models, I would say, is a really nice thing to do too, because it shows that there's lots of autistic people out there, but also there's kind of those more skills and things that they can build on. So I tend to, especially with teenagers, tend to share role models like Greta Thunberg, who's used her interests and her passion to really make a big change in the world. But there's lots and lots of autistic role models, and not everyone is really, really famous. It might just be that there's someone on the National Autistic Society who shared a bit about themselves, who it might be quite relevant to your child. So I would kind of look out for those role models and someone that your child might be able to compare themselves with, so that they feel that they are not the only person with that particular difference. Okay. Let's move on then. So in terms of useful resources, like I said, I do think it can be helpful for, as parents and carers, to go into having these conversations with some knowledge and understanding yourselves, mostly just so you feel confident, and you feel like if some questions come your way, you can kind of, think of some information, some answers to share. So some kind of key resources that I would recommend is, there is a book that was put together by the National Autistic Society, which is the kind of leading charity in the UK for supporting everything to do with autism. And they have a book called Autism, Talking About a Diagnosis, and you can just order it off their website. I don't think it's very much, and it's just like a guide to all of these conversations if you would like some more information. I would also recommend talking with your child about their autism diagnosis by Raylan Dundon, but also that little book of autism frequently asked questions, which is actually where I got those quotes from. So it just breaks down kind of any concerns that a parent might have, or questions that they might want to ask before they themselves go into the having conversation with their child, and in case similar questions come up. So they're not very long books at all, but it might just be something that you find helpful. I mean, you might not feel like you need to read these at all, but if you feel like you would like more information about autism and about how to present some information to your child, there are definitely some key recommendations. And in terms of activity ideas, just so you have a few more concrete ideas to go away with, there's a few different things you could do. So there is a video on YouTube called Me and My Autism, about a girl called Rosie who's autistic. And the video is really about her sharing her experiences of being autistic and like a day in a life of, I guess. So what can be quite nice is to watch the video with your child and just note what is similar with Rosie, maybe what differences they have with Rosie. You'll see her, doing some stimming behavior, so maybe flapping a bit. She will talk about her interests, things that she likes, doesn't like. And it's just a nice way of introducing this idea of being autistic, and it might be nice for your child to kind of see similarities that they do have with Rosie, and then opening again that conversation. Well, Rosie has autism and you also have autism, and like these are things that we do tend to notice. The making an about me poster, it kind of links again similar to those individual differences. So once you've gone through different family members and thought about their strengths and differences, you can make a lovely, about me poster about your child and think, what is their strengths? What are things that they do find tricky? Or if they are interested in poetry or music, they could even write like a song about themselves. So just creating some kind of document that helps them to explore things that they like, things that they don't like, things that they're good at, things that they're not so good at, and again looking out for those patterns, and helping them to see that autism is just part of who they are and part of their identity. For children who maybe have less language or are much younger, something like a social story might be quite a nice tool to use. So just a really visual tool really that gives kind of almost facts. And we can send some examples if you'd like any, but this is probably a better option for a child who's got less language, or maybe would feel quite overwhelmed with all those kind of words and language that we spoke about previously. You can use an activity that's really thinking about more like an ingredients of a person. I think people do this in lots of different ways, but thinking, what is it that makes up your child? Have they got a bit of humour? They like doing particular things, and just kind of adding all the ingredients that makes them makes them unique and makes them special, and including in that this idea of autism. And you can open up then the conversation about what is autism. It's, being good at these things, struggling with these things, and that can be quite a nice way as well. And again, you can really tailor that to your child's needs. So it could be ingredients for food, or it could be a slightly different thing depending on their interests. You can make a book of photos of your child engaging in different activities and just using really simple phrases. So I don't know, if the child's called John, John likes this. John likes, I don't know, flapping his arm. John likes dancing to music. John doesn't like. And then you can kind of go through things that they like, don't like, things that you've noticed. And that's, again, it's less language use and more the child can look at themselves doing different activities. And finally, you can read books together. So there are fictional and non-fictional books, and sometimes young people just like to read, a story that is about a neurodiverse character. So I can share again some, I think they come up on the next slides, but if you want any other recommendations, I'm sure we can find you some more. So just having a character a little bit like them in their story is quite nice as well. So in terms of books, I'm trying to categorize them in age. So for the younger ones, the ones in primary school, there's quite a few out there. I would say for the much younger ones, things like All Cats Are on the Spectrum is a really lovely visual book that they could look at. Same about I Am an Aspie Girl. It's for younger children. And that one's specifically for girls. And I think just a note to say, what you will probably find is a lot of the literature historically at least, has been focusing on boys. So if there is anyone who's come today who's got a daughter who has got a recent diagnosis of autism, it might be nice to pick out a book that is specifically around girls. The language might be slightly different and what they talk about might be slightly different, and it might be slightly more relatable for your daughter. What else have we got? See, I See Things Differently. A First Book, Autism, is a really good one for young children. And My Awesome Autism, helping children learn about the autism diagnosis. So you can kind of look at these together, and I'd really encourage you to look with your child so that they can, you can read a bit, they can ask questions, you can build on some of the information that is presented there, but they are great ways of just starting to open up that conversation a bit more. And for the older ones, perhaps in secondary school, in terms of a fictional book, there is A Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, about a boy. He's got Asperger's. Asperger's syndrome is no longer diagnosed. It would just come under the umbrella of autism, but they might relate potentially to some of the experiences that he has. There is also a fictional book called M is for Autism, which is about a girl going to secondary school and kind of her experiences at school. So they might relate to that one. But there are some also more, I guess, guides that are written by autistic young people and autistic adults to just really help navigate the tricky world of being a teenager, and how that might be different, and how some things might, need a bit more support if you're autistic as well. So there's the Awesome Autistic Go-To Guide, and there's also the Spectrum Girl Survival Guide, which talks about pretty much every topic a teenage girl would ever want to discuss. So yeah, I'd really strongly recommend these books. And of course, you don't need to share all of them. It would just be like picking which ones you think would be most relevant. And again, it's mostly using them as well as a tool to start a bit of a conversation and share some information, but then pairing them with that conversation with you as well, not just giving the book and kind of not continuing that.